one and all. High fly ball into right field. She is gone. He struck him out. 2 balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. It's his way back. Walk him off. Chris Taylor.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined tonight by Matthew Moreno and special guest, Corporate Greg Bergman, joining the show here to break down a busy first day before, or I should say trade deadline eve. We discussed Tommy Edman and Michael Kopech, which we'll get back into tonight, but then some afternoon news with Amed Rosario rejoining the Dodgers. Greg, I'll come to you first. First of all, thanks for being on with us. I know you host the Blue Review over for ESPN LA. On their YouTube channel. So give me just your as the day is closing and a couple moves have been made. How are we feeling?
So, I mean, I'm feeling okay. I like that the Dodgers got a little bit of depth, but thank you very much for having me on. I always enjoy being on with you guys, especially to me and Matt go back and forth in text, and he's always ripping me for something that he hears on the radio, but that's just out of fun. But I actually feel decent. I still want a big move. I'm kind of, I don't know where you guys are at, but if it's going to be, if a big move happens, I want them to get rid of as many people as possible, but there's only a few names that I'm really looking for. So it's don't do something just to do it, but I still want some big names.
And we're going to get into that as well. Kind of what's the next move for the Dodgers, because I think every Dodgers fan, if there's one thing, there might be only one thing that every Dodgers fan can agree on right now. It's that they can't be done yet. There has to be one more move, at least. Some would argue maybe two more moves left to be done. Matt, you and I haven't discussed this. It was me and Daniel preview this morning. It was me and Scott after the fact. Give me just big picture, the 3 guys that the Dodgers bring in. Has this been a positive day or an underwhelming day in your estimation?
No, I think it's been a positive day. You know, it's not like we're sitting here if 24 hours from now, if these are the only moves the Dodgers have made, then at that point, you know, yes, like what was the front office doing type thing. But positive so far. However, I know Greg's asking for a big move. I know a lot of fans are asking for it. I might be the one throwing cold water on that, but I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait until we get further into the show before I do all that.
Well, let's talk about Rosario. Rosario is the afternoon move, and I know Art Scott Gearman had mentioned his name, and this was a stunner to me for a number of reasons. They had him, they let him go, and then they trade for him again for the second straight trade deadline. I'll be honest, I dig in, and I'm encouraged. He's having a great offensive season, much better than he was having last year. We know who he is defensively, which is a utility guy who isn't very good at any of the spots, but he technically can play them. And yet offensively against lefties, against righties, he's been above league average in both of those categories. To Matt's pleasure, Greg's pleasure, both of you. I got the 2 batting average guys on here. He's hitting 307, so we know you love that. Well, Greg, I'm sorry. Are you not a batting average guy?
Don't tell me what I am and am not. You don't know me. I'm an OBP guy. I'm not a batting average guy.
Yeah. So here, Matt, I'll come to you first then. 307 batting average for your guy, Amed Rosario.
Yeah, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame, right? That's the threshold for it. I kind of joke. I mean, I feel like I text Scott when he said that he had called it. I felt like I also had maybe said Amed Rosario, but I don't know if maybe I was piggybacking off of him. But anyway,
give Scott his credit.
Yeah, I'll let Scott have this one. When they trade for Bellinger, though, then that credit's all me tomorrow. So once that happens, you guys can say that was my call. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting move on one hand. I mean, Jeff, like you said, he could play multiple positions. He's not necessarily going to stand out at a bunch of them at one specific one, but he can move around. And we saw last year with the Dodgers when they traded for him, they moved him to second base. And so he had to kind of adjust to learning that position. And I think maybe that might have lent to some of the struggles that he had at the plate. I know overall he just wasn't having a great season anyway before the trade. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how they sort of mix him in now. And I mean, they have a lot of moving parts with Tommy Edman. I know we're going to get into that, and just the group of reserve infielders too that are currently on the roster.
Yeah, Greg, you mentioned on-base percentage. I have some bad news for you if you're an on-base percentage guy. Amed Rosario, first percentile in Major League Baseball in walk rate. He has basically one of the worst, if not the worst, walk rate in all of Major League Baseball. Although hitting 307, the on-base is about 331. So it didn't cost him anyone. It was a minor league reliever, Michael Flynn, who was a AAA. This was a guy who they signed to a one-year minor league deal. That was all that it cost them to reacquire Amed Rosario. So given all of that, give me your thoughts on the Rosario move this afternoon.
So I like it, especially against lefties, because that's what he's supposed to do. He's supposed to come in and just kind of hit lefties. So if you're going to put him as a platoon, so where are we thinking in a platoon? Either as at shortstop and second base, kind of you're platooning with Gavin Lux, or where are we thinking here?
I think you might be looking at your starting third baseman for a little while.
Well, you might be starting third baseman for a little. Okay, there's going to be the problem is they have to play him. But I think most of all, I just like that they have depth, guys that actually can get up in it. And I like the 331 batting on base percentage. That to me is a solid on base. It may not be through the walk, but he's getting on base, however it happens to be. So I don't mind it. It's better than what was already there. I mean, as much as I liked Miguel Vargas, he wasn't showing anything. And with all the injuries, especially to the infield, it's better than Kike. Taylor was starting to come around. Lux is having a hot moment, but who knows how long that is going to be. So, because I'm not a Gavin Lux guy, never have been, but I'm very happy with his last month. But I just like the fact that it's a little bit of depth, and it's going to help them moving towards the postseason when really didn't have a lot down there.
Yeah, super chat here from Laker Toby. Laker, we appreciate it. He said, stop me if you've heard this before. Rosario, really? I'm lip sync confident that Andrew Friedman will make the big move. So, I mean, the thing about Rosario, Greg, I'm glad you brought up platoons because, again, to Toby's point, I was surprised that Amed Rosario was the move. But as I played this out and I said, all right, how does he fit in? And I sent this out on social media. He's been above average against both lefties and righties. He's played second base, shortstop, and right field. And we've already mentioned a couple of the guys. When I went through and looked, I say, okay, we know the Dodgers like their platoons, especially in the playoffs, being able to play off matchups. You've got a guy in Gavin Lux who, even with the recent hot streaks, is one of the worst hitters in baseball against lefties. He's got like a 33 weighted runs created plus. So this is a very easy. Gavin Lux is, trending toward almost league average against righties, which is saying something considering where he was, but he's almost league average against righties. So now Rosario to me is the easy against lefties. He's playing second base. And then you go out to right field where you've got Andy Pages. Andy Pages absolutely crushing lefties, but struggling against righties. And so Rosario can be the right-handed side of the platoon in right field. So I see Lux and Pages both becoming platoon guys, with Rosario being the opposite side of both of those positions. Again, a guy who's not good defensively, but second base and right field are kind of two spots you feel decent about putting a guy who maybe doesn't have the best defensive skills. Obviously, some speed still there. However, to Matt's point, this isn't a scenario where Mookie Betts is back and Max Muncy is back, and they have those two shortstop and third base positions, even Miguel Rojas back, sort of taken care of. So I do see long-term how this move might play out if everything sort of stacks in place the way that it's supposed to. But so that's the reason. Because of the cost and because of the fit, I like it. And Greg, to the last point that you made, just the fact that they're adding depth here. This has been a big conversation we've had. These aren't guys that are going to be top 6, top 7 guys in the order necessarily, even Tommy Edman, who we'll get to. But what it does is the 7, 8, 9 spot in the lineup isn't going to be a black hole anymore, in theory, especially because of platoon splits. While at the same time, you're not necessarily in Edman, you're probably upgrading yourself defensively, whereas Rosario, probably a lateral move at worst, I would say, in that regard. Matt, how much value do you place on that? Because I feel like that's the thing that in talking to people and reading social media, this isn't the big move. To Laker Toby's point, this isn't the big move that they've made, and yet there's still a little bit of time till the deadline to make the big move. But it feels like these are important, helpful moves, even if they're not the 10 out of 10 home run swing.
Yeah, they definitely are. I mean, we've seen over the past several weeks, fans were questioning why Kevin Biggio was still on the roster and what is Kike Hernandez doing, Chris Taylor, like why are they playing? So in theory, on paper, the Dodgers have upgraded in some sense, at least, for one or two of those guys, even with Gavin Lux turning things around. I know that, it's fair to wonder if Lux is going to be able to sustain that because the larger sample size we've seen from him was struggling this year. And so, sure, the jury is still out a bit. It'll be interesting. And once, Mookie comes back, I think Muncy's a little bit more of a question mark. But as the Dodgers get healthier, and even, Freddie Freeman's obviously away for his family reasons right now. But once the Dodgers get like their stars back, I think that's when you'll really see, maybe the true benefit of having somebody like Amed Rosario and maybe Tommy Edman, who, I'm not necessarily all that high on. But if they do, if they're, Jeff, like you said, just not a black hole anymore down at the bottom of the lineup, then the Dodgers are better off than they have been, for most of this season.
Yeah. I mean, just Greg, looking at the roster, I was trying to map out, okay, projecting somewhat with health here, obviously projecting that Mookie Betts is back, projecting that Max Muncy is back, and trying to figure out what does that mean for the playoff roster. I'm looking at it. You've got Ohtani, you've got Smith and Barnes, Freeman, Lux, Rojas, Edman, Muncy, Teoscar, Rosario, Mookie Betts, Andy Pages. Those would be the 12 that I feel somewhat good about. Again, in part, Pages was originally on the outside looking in for me, but given what he's been able to do against lefties, I feel like put him in right field. The defense has been bad in center, but in right, he's fine. And then against lefties. That means for Taylor, Kike, Hayward, and Outman, that's only one spot left for those four guys. And I would give the edge to Chris Taylor, even though Kike Hernandez has had some big spots, but Jason Hayward being left off. I mean, those are Kike, Taylor, and Hayward. That's three pretty decent-sized names, Greg, that might be competing for one spot on the playoff roster.
Yeah, because that's what they are keeping most of those guys on the roster for. You're talking about Kike and Taylor. That's what they were here to be on the playoff roster, because they have made a lot of big time. They've had some big time spots in the postseason. So if they're left off, it's going to come down to what Pages does in the through the rest of the year, because he could very well be on the outside looking in, and it could be a guy like Jason Hayward, or it could possibly even be Kike or Taylor. Pages really needs to step up these last 2 months, because it's been starting to dip a little bit. He doesn't seem to be getting very many hits. He's not getting on base as much as he was. I think he had a pretty hot stretch for a little bit, cooled off, got a little bit hot again, cooled off again. He's in that cool off spot again. He really needs to step up more for him to be on that playoff roster spot that you're talking about. Otherwise, he's not going to get it.
Yeah, looking at his Pages hitting just 208 in the month of July, to Greg's point.
Yeah.
And ironically, remember that Rosario was left off the postseason roster for the NLDS last year. So, I mean, I think at the point of this trade, he's obviously having a better season this time than last year, but who knows? Like, maybe for whatever reason, like if things don't necessarily go the way they plan, maybe he's not included again.
Yeah. We've got another super chat here from Laura. Laura's asking, is it likely Ryan Yarborough will be part of a trade package tomorrow after being DFA'd today? That was the other kind of notable news. Honestly, you could argue bigger news than the Amed Rosario trade was that a guy like Yarborough, who had been a pretty consistent piece of this roster, maybe one of the only consistent pieces of the roster in the bullpen especially, was kind of the roster casualty, if you will, because Michael Flynn sent out, was not on the 40-man roster. They needed to open a spot. Yarborough was DFA'd. Matt, how surprised were you to see his name as a guy that was on the outside looking in? And to Laura's point, could still be a part of a trade. They've got a few days to trade him, but will not be a member of the Dodgers moving forward.
I was a little surprised, but also, I mean, he struggled recently. And he's not his season numbers don't look that bad, but if you trust my eye test measurements, you've known that Yarborough just hasn't been able to replicate really like the success he had last year. So like everything has just kind of been off. Like he hasn't really been able to put it together. So from that standpoint, I think Dodgers have basically, I mean, we've seen it with some of the other pitchers. They've run out of roster spots. Like in a normal circumstance, even if they were going to trade James Paxton, I don't think they DFA him when they do. I think they just would have started shopping him, trying to work on a trade before having to go the DFA route first, because River Ryan was coming up. So I think just the way everything has happened, all the injuries, the way they piled up, have just made things a little funny this year. And I think that's where Yarborough sort of fits into that as well, because of now the guys that they're going to try and hopefully plan on getting back.
Greg, what about you? Were you surprised by this?
I was a little bit surprised by it, because he's the lefty long reliever that they have. So now who gets that spot? Are they going to move Justin Robleski into that move when it gets a little bit later down the line, because they don't see him as a starter in the postseason? Will they start to look for him there? Because that's essentially what he was there for. So the fact that Yarborough is going, he has been bad over the last few weeks, he's been very, very bad. He was getting touched up over and over again. So yeah, I was a little bit surprised, but it obviously he was not going to be a guy that was going to make the postseason roster. It didn't seem like with the way he was playing. So it was just easy DFA. And from what I understand too, he can somehow make it through waivers, which I doubt actually happens, or he'll be absolutely be traded, because you can put him back on the 40-man if you don't like something. So he's not fully gone yet, but he is definitely not. It doesn't seem like he'll be a Dodger much longer.
To the point you're making, Greg, I think the biggest thing to me was just looking ahead to the postseason roster and saying, where does he fit? I mean, you want to talk about, we're just talking about some guys that might be on the outside looking in on the bench. Let me give you some bullpen names: Phillips, Trinan, Hudson, Vesia, Gratterall, Kelly, Kopech, who they just traded for today. That's 7 guys. And if those 7 all make the bullpen in the postseason, even if you go to like a 4-man rotation with a 9-man bullpen, you're talking about Banda, Honeywell, Grove, and Brazier. Those 4 would be competing for just 2 spots. And I didn't even mention whichever starting pitchers are going to be on the outside. I'm like you, Greg. I think Robleski is going to be a reliever in the playoffs. And so Robleski might be taking one of those spots. You could argue that Bobby Miller could be a postseason playoff or a bullpen guy. Just, hey, throw 102 miles an hour for an inning and see what happens. I mean, even River Ryan, if there's not a rotation spot for him, you could see being a bullpen guy. So that's basically 7 names who would be competing for 2 spots potentially. And Yarborough, you can make a case, would be 8th on that list of guys, maybe ahead of Ryan Brazier. I don't know, depending on what they see from him. But so that's why it wasn't surprising to me. You've both mentioned how much he has struggled lately. He's a get things over the finish line type of a guy, not a guy that helps you win a championship, I think. And so for them to see the writing on the wall and say, hey, let's just cut bait now and see what happens, kind of wasn't overall super surprising to me. Another super chat here from Mix Master Mike. Any starting pitchers left outside of Crochet and Flaherty the Dodgers could realistically get before the deadline? Is Chris Bassett or Kevin Gossman realistic? We appreciate the super chat, Mike. As always, we appreciate everybody joining us live, but this kind of sets us up to a bigger conversation we wanted to have, which was, is there another big move coming for the Dodgers? I would argue that if they go out and get a starting pitcher of a quality of the guys like we're talking about here, then I think that cements this trade deadline as a success for the Dodgers. Right now, I think they're looking at like a C+ at best as far as a trade deadline grade, which is better than an F, as some of us might know from high school and college days. It's better than an F, but it's not necessarily successful given the standards that we hold ourselves to. That we're 4.0 students over here, Greg. C+ aren't going to get the job done at the trade deadline, okay? But give me your list, Greg, because we were texting about this briefly. As far as starting pitching goes, I think we all agree it's the biggest need, especially now. Give me who's at the top of the list, who's on the list of guys you'd be happy with.
I mean, I think that if they actually do get Crochet, I might be able to convince myself to be happy with it, but I don't think I actually am. If they actually happens, I'm sure I'll be like, yeah, okay, this is great, fantastic. But honestly, on the surface, it just doesn't look good for Crochet for me. He's tripling his amount of innings he's ever thrown in his career, and it's not going to be close. I don't believe he actually had a good outing in his last outing as well, but he's also making demands now too, where he's saying that I will not be a reliever in the postseason. I will not pitch in the postseason unless I get an extension. Okay, well, so I'm sorry, guy, but this is not your choice. You're if you do come to the Dodgers, you're coming to the Dodgers because this is what you're going to help win a championship. And you're going to be a guy that has to have positionality as much as the word that the Dodgers absolutely love. Everybody plays in every position for the most part around here. And if you can't go to the bullpen, then I have no interest in you whatsoever, because especially with how much you're pitching, it just seems like it doesn't work out. So I'm out mostly on Crochet. You can convince me for Jack Flaherty, but Flaherty to me has not been good for 4 years, even though he's having a good year now. He was really good for the Cardinals about 4 years ago. I really only go all in, and I know it's not going to happen. They've already said it's not going to happen, Jeff and Matt, but I would go all in and give him as much as you possibly can for Scubal and make that happen, because that can help you for years to come. I know it's not going to happen, but that's really the only starting pitcher that I see that will be an absolute difference maker and be somebody that you can slot right into the staff for the postseason and be totally fine. I don't think anybody else on that roster does it.
If they said, hey, River Ryan and Justin Robleski, that's our starting point for a Tarek Scubal trade.
if it starts and ends right there.
Well, it doesn't end. We're 75% of the way there.
I'm moving both of those guys for Scubal.
Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, I get that it's 2 for 1 and they've looked good, but again, we don't know what they're going to become. We know what Scubal in. He's going to be the AL Cy Young winner.
Yeah. Yeah. Matt, just out of curiosity, where are you at? Like if River Ryan, Justin Robleski, and a Dalton Rushing or something, if that's the 3 guys that it takes to get a Scubal trade done, would you be comfortable with that?
If it's only those 3 guys?
Yeah, and then we're talking guys kind of like they traded today, sort of hovering around the 20 spot in the organization.
Yeah, I probably am doing that. I mean, I think that's trading both Ryan and Robleski would hurt, but you're basically replenishing them with you're replenishing them with a Cy Young caliber pitcher. So that addresses your starting rotation. Now, Dalton Rushing, I think, is somebody like they do need to do something with him. Like he's a big trade chip right now because what are your plans for him? You just signed Will Smith to this extension. You have the greatest backup catcher in Austin Barnes right now on a career hitting streak. So Dalton Rushing, he's blocked, right? And Will Smith's not going to kick out to DH. Is he going to play third base? Probably not either. So Dalton Rushing is sort of, your trade. And then you do have additional catchers in the organization, younger catchers behind him that could then come up once Will Smith starts to get older in age. And so if it's those 3, you can probably talk me into it.
Yeah, and Scubal, by the way, has 2 more years of team control after this.
Exactly.
So you're getting 2.5 years of him. So, yeah, look, I mean, it's been interesting because obviously most people were unfamiliar with River Ryan until a month ago, and now in a lot of people's minds, he's become untouchable. And I've seen it. I get it. It's just crazy the swings that we will take after 2 starts at the major league level. So I'm with you. But I think I agree with you that by all accounts, Detroit is not interested in trading him because of that 2.5 years of team control. I'm with you on Crochet. And I've kind of been like this the whole time. The innings limit thing terrifies me. The role terrifies me. It only got worse when he said, I'm not pitching in the playoffs unless there's an extension. And I'm not even I almost applaud the selfishness and the sort of, hey, take care of yourself. You are having a great year. It's like you said, 2 to 3 times more than you've ever pitched before. If you can get the bag now, more power to you, bud. If you could sign $100 million contract, knock yourself out. The flip side to that is it tells me he might not believe in his own arm to keep this up. And that terrifies me a little bit. So I'm with you. I wouldn't pay I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze, so to speak, on the Crochet deal. What they would have to give up was the same type of package we were just talking about for Scubal. It would be for Crochet. And that would be way too much for me. So Matt, to me, Jack Flaherty's the guy I like the most because I think he's really good right now. I wouldn't be worried about him in a playoff spot. And he's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. So the cost wouldn't be crazy. I don't think we're talking River Ryan, Justin Robleski type guys. No, I mean, the look on your face, I know it's a trade deadline, but it's an immediate hang up if they ask for River Ryan.
Right. And I think that's to me, I think Jack Flaherty is having a nice season. I know he's had some injury concerns in the past, and so it's a good year, but is it just sort of a flash in the pan? And hey, if you strike when the iron's hot and he continues to have a good year, then great, but at what cost? And I think seeing what Kikuchi just went for and what some of the prices are, the asking prices are, maybe it's not literally River Ryan for Jack Flaherty, but it does seem like you're not necessarily going to be able to get any sort of reasonable or fair deal, or even maybe overpay a little bit. You might have to overpay by a lot to get Flaherty. And so that's what concerns me, because if that's at that point, I don't know if I do it. And I know I've texted this to you Jack Flaherty, you have River Ryan at home who kind of profiles in this similar way, hard throwing right-hander. You even have Bobby Miller if he could get back on track. So I'm just not sure if I would go down that route because of what I fear the asking price is going to end up being.
Close your ears, guys. There's going to be nerd stats coming at you right now. There's percentiles and red and blue, and so I'm just warning you. I know. Yeah, Greg's getting close to nerd stats, Matt. He's a big OBP guy now. That's that's the halfway house to nerd stats.
I mean, OBP is so much different than WRC plus an X bacon. It's
anyways, Jack Flaherty, 93rd percentile in strikeout rate, striking out 32% of guys this season. The walk rate, 94th percentile, just 4.5%. The whiff rate is elite. The expected ERA is elite. Exit velocity, chase rate are all very good. And so, again, I know we joke about the nerd stats. The reason these numbers are helpful is because when a guy like Flaherty goes from a 4.99 ERA last year and a 1.58 whip to 2.95 and 0.96, you say, all right, what are we really doing here? And it was much like James Paxton at the beginning of the year. The reason nerd stats are helpful is because when Paxton was awesome for the first 2.5 months, if you looked at these numbers, you say, it's not going to last. Like, there's nothing sustainable here. It's smoke and mirrors. It's batted ball luck, whatever. With Flaherty, you look at this and what's the recipe for success? Swing and miss and not walking anybody. He's literally one of the best pitchers in all of Major League Baseball, not just in one of those categories, in both of those categories. He's 28 years old. He's a local kid. So I think there's the possibility that if you do pay up for Jack Flaherty and get him in the organization, it's not unexpected that he might sign an extension with you if everything works out. And so you might end up getting, the 4 or 5 years of team control for the cost of a guy who you only had to pay for 4 months of team control. So that's why I like Flaherty, not because I think he's a better pitcher than Crochet necessarily, but just because the cost profile comparatively, the risk, all of that kind of a thing, that's where I land with him. I mean, he made 27 starts last year, so a little bit of durability shown last year at least. I know he's had injury problems prior to that, but Flaherty for me is the guy that I know the Yankees are close to, but Greg, if I were going to go kind of put my sights on one dude and try and hone in, it would be Jack Flaherty.
I mean, Jack Flaherty can be helpful, but everything that you see just look at his past. I mean, outside of 2019, when he was fourth in Cy Young voting and actually was getting MVP voting as well, he's been bad. He's just been bad up and down. He never had much better than they had 1 year was a 3.5 ERA just about, and his FIP, which here's your nerd stats that I like. The FIP. You like the FIP, you do. Like it's always high. It's always over 4, and even now it's still over 3. I mean, he's just not a guy. And even if you look at his postseason stats, he gives up hits, he gives up runs. He's not a tremendous. I mean, it's very small sample size, obviously, but in those games in the postseason just hasn't been that great. He's pitched 4 times. He's just about a 4 ERA. His whip was 1.3. Even last year, he had a 2.5 whip. Like, he's just not a fantastic pitcher to me. I don't think he's a difference maker in the postseason, and that's where I'm looking for. If you're going to move these guys, some of these prospects, it better be for someone that's actually going to make a difference in the postseason. And I don't know if Jack Flaherty is that guy that is going to actually make a difference in the postseason. So to me, I don't want to make a move just to make a move. And I think that's where Matt was going early on, was like, just don't move things around just to move chess pieces around. It doesn't make sense. And Jack Flaherty, as much as has had a good year and all those numbers, I don't know if that's sustainable. And I don't think you're going to get it in the postseason. And if that's the case, I'm not in on it.
Yeah, and that's why I was glad they were out on Yusei Kikuchi, who was a guy they had been connected to, because that was the type of player that I'm like, I just don't get it. Like, to your River Ryan point, like Robleski, Landon Knack sitting right there, they could these guys could give you 75% of the production, not cost you anything, and I didn't think Kikuchi was going to be a guy they were counting on come postseason time at all. 2 more notes on Flaherty, Matt, and then I'd love to get your thoughts. I do think there's some significance to a guy who comes up as a huge prospect. That tells me there's a little bit of a pedigree. There's a little bit of a reason to believe. This is the reason a lot of people were skeptical of a guy like James Outman. He has the breakout last year, and people are saying, look, this came out of nowhere, and then he struggles, and maybe they were right. Maybe it was a flash in the pan. With Flaherty, he comes up. He was really good in 2018 and 2019. And then from there, you can kind of tell a story as to how we got to this point. 2020, weird season, as we know, 40 innings pitched. 2021, injuries limited him to less than 80 innings. 2022, 36 innings. Last year, his first season, full season back, and continues to struggle in the midst. But I just see a pattern there, and there's a narrative that I can tell myself as to, okay, this is a guy who's battled through injuries. Last season, first time he's healthy, gets traded midway through the year. This year, he settles in. The walk rate is down. The strikeout rate is up. And all of a sudden, it's back to, at just 28 years old, by the way, being the guy that kind of everybody expected him to be 4 or 5 years ago. Matt, where are you at on Flaherty? Like, if the Dodgers were to go add Flaherty and that's it, it's Rosario, it's Edman, it's Kopech, and it's Flaherty. Is that a successful, satisfying trade deadline for you?
I would have to see what they gave up for Flaherty. That's my big hang up right now. Is I feel like I'm somewhere in the middle between you and Greg, which is great for our show because we have every opinion covered. Like I think he can be a little bit more impactful than Greg is maybe expecting. I'm not quite as bullish on him as you are. I do agree with your points, Jeff, that there is the prospect history and all that, but also by that same token, like the injury stuff that he's dealt with, like that concerns me as well. So ultimately, I would have to see what they were to trade for Flaherty. If it's nothing crazy and that ends up being kind of their big, addition for the rotation, I think you could talk me into it. But then for me, the bigger concern and then the bigger question now becomes is how much pressure and expectations are on Yamamoto and Kershaw and even Bobby Miller to, potentially get back and at a higher level than what we saw this year, and for Gavin Stone to keep doing what he's doing.
Yeah.
So then it just becomes a matter of, okay, like it's a little bit of a repeat of last year where the Dodgers saying, hey, we have XYZ coming back and we have these other guys that we are expecting to just start performing better. And if that doesn't happen, then you're ending up in kind of a dangerous spot.
Yeah. Looking at the rotation, excuse me, we did this with the bullpen and with the bench. Currently, you've got Glasnow, top of the rotation. You've got Yamamoto, obviously a major question mark. Kershaw, question mark. Gavin Stone, rookie, pitching well, but I think safe to say a question mark. River Ryan, question mark. Robleski, question mark. Knack, question mark. Bobby Miller, 12 question marks. Walker Buehler, 14 question marks. You go down this list, and there's a world where we get to the postseason, and I tell you, hey, Glasnow, Kershaw, Stone, and Ryan, that's your 4, and we don't hate it. We feel pretty decent about it. There's also a world. But like the way River Ryan
I don't think we do.
Okay, talk me through it. The way that Stone and Ryan have pitched over the last, River Ryan's made 2 starts, Gavin Stone over the season. Like, I know the name doesn't flash sexiness to you, but if we're talking about actual on-field performance, I don't know how you could be disappointed if he maintains that all the way up until the postseason and then heads into the postseason looking like the guy we've seen this season.
So Gavin Stone, to me, I really like him. I like a lot of the stuff that he's doing. But if you go into just his game log by itself, you can see in him that it's starting to catch up to him. He's being relied upon to 3 of his last 4 starts. He's given up 4 runs, he's only gone 6 innings 1 time in July by itself. That to me means he's starting to get tired. That means to me that he was a really strong pitcher in that first half, and it was looking like he was going to be an all-star level starter. I think he was 9-2 going into the all-star break, and now he's 9-4. And giving up runs, and it's consistently happening. So.
Fair.
Look, I just don't feel as good as you. I think when it comes to Gavin Stone, I really like his game, and I think that he can be impactful and maybe even be impactful in the playoffs. But if he's your number 2 starter, I don't feel good at all. And if you're telling me that even if you get Jack Flaherty and you go and you say it's Glasnow, Flaherty, Kershaw, Stone, I'm not feeling good about any of that. I feel terrible, actually. I don't feel good about the postseason in the slightest. It just seems like another situation like it was last year, where we're going to have Bobby Miller, when Kershaw's your number 1 starter, and Bobby Miller, who's did exactly this, was your number 2 starter and got blown up. I don't feel good about that at all. Without Yamamoto or getting some massive pitcher like Scubal, that's not happening. The pitching staff looks horrendous to me.
Horrendous feels strong. Matt, I'd love to get your thoughts. Horrendous feels very strong to me. This feels like spoiled Dodger fans complaining about the pitching staff. But where are you at, Matt?
I think, again, somewhere in the middle. Again, Jeff, the rotation you laid out, assuming the trends that we have seen through the first half and now, more than the first half, the All-Star break doesn't break up the first half of the schedule. Sure. That's a different conversation. Yeah. What we've seen so far in 2024, if those trends hold, then fine. I can be comfortable in the rotation with the rotation. But again, my concern is that that's counting on not 1 thing, not 2 things, not 3 things to go right. And we've seen baseball way too often. That just doesn't happen. And so that's what my concern is, that I can't necessarily believe and bank World Series aspirations on, hey, these 4 or 5 things are going to go right. And that's how the Dodgers are going to end up winning a World Series. If 2 of them go right. Like maybe you can figure it out. Like they do have a talented lineup that is, if the stars are starring, if they show up and do well, like that helps obviously. But I just don't. It's not likely. I'm not a betting person by any means, but it's not a safe bet to say, Gavin Stone is going to go wire to wire for the first time in his career and really uphold, the pitch to the level that we've seen, as great as he's been. And Clayton Kershaw's return from shoulder surgery is going to be perfect and things will be fine. And, I forgot who else you named. Yamamoto. Like Yamamoto's the big question.
I didn't say Yamamoto. That was I'm projecting. I mean, that's the negativity I'm projecting here. It's in a world even without Yamamoto. It was Glasnow, Kershaw, Stone, and River Ryan were the 4 names I mentioned.
I mean, yeah, you would be hoping that, look, we saw River Ryan in a hostile environment against the Astros. I thought he handled himself well. So that's what I think fans would be grasping onto if River Ryan is starting a playoff game. But still, a playoff game is going to be different than, even what it was at Minute Maid Park. So it's just, as Laura's saying, too many question marks. Like that's my hang up with the rotation is on paper, I could see how it can happen. I just don't believe that all those things are going to go right.
Yeah. Let me just clarify real quick, and then I'll come back to you. I promise, Greg. I'm not saying, hey, write in permanent marker that all 4 of these guys. I'm just saying there's a world where Gavin Stone goes into the playoffs with a 3.5 ERA. And just because his name's Gavin Stone, we might not feel as confident as we would if that was, Bobby Miller with a 3.5 ERA and the same underlying metrics underneath it. I'm not saying we should all project Clayton Kershaw to be awesome, because obviously what we've seen so far gives us reason for pause, I guess, whether you are optimistic or pessimistic about him. And River Ryan's only made 2 starts. My point is, I agree with you. Like, we can't project everything to go right. I think so far we've projected everything to go wrong, and it has. Walker Buehler, worst outcome possible. Bobby Miller, worst outcome possible. Dustin May, worst outcome possible. Yamamoto, worst outcome possible. So I think we've kind of had the luck go against us so far. So I'm just painting a world where, even though I'm saying they need to go out and get a starting pitcher, I don't think it's like cross the Dodgers off with a permanent marker if they don't get a starter, is my point. So, Greg, I apologize. I'm coming back to you.
No, it's not that. I mean, horrendous was probably too strong a word. Maybe went a little bit overboard, but at the same time, I don't feel confident. I don't feel confident that those 4 that you mentioned, what was it? It was Glasnow, Kershaw, Ryan, and Stone. Yeah. I don't feel confident that those 4 can get you to a World Series. And let's be honest here. What are we looking for the Dodgers this year? We're looking for a World Series victory this year. This is to me a very, very important year for the Dodgers. So if you give me those 4 starters, as much as we don't really know what Ryan is after 2 starts, the fact of the matter is it's only been 2 starts, and you're going to rely on a guy that has, by that time, has maybe 8 to 10 starts underneath him. You're looking, it's a little bit tough to go in that way. So, and Stone, again, we saw what his numbers have been looking like recently. He is giving up runs recently, and he's not going very, very far into the games either. That's, to me, is what the concerning thing is, because throughout this season so far, he's gone 6 innings consistently, and that has dropped off very much so. That's why I'm not confident in Stone. Has nothing to do with his name. So let me ask you your own question.
Great.
If you have those 4 guys, are you confident in a postseason run to the World Series?
Look, my caveat is always, I'm never confident about any postseason run because of the way baseball is set up. I think the essence of this Dodgers team is not going to be their starting pitching. It's going to be putting out the best lineup in Major League Baseball, because they have Mookie Betts and Shohei Ohtani and Freddie Freeman and Will Smith and Teoscar Hernandez and hopefully Max Muncy 1 through 6, and then a 7, 8, 9 that we just talked about that's much improved over what it has been for the entirety of the season. So the Dodgers have gone into postseasons with 3 aces, and it's gone sideways. We mentioned Bobby Miller, a guy everyone felt great about. He was the one guy we felt great about going into the postseason last year, and he was a disaster. And so, there's a part of me that I see people in the chat joking about PTSD. I understand all of that, which is, again, to be clear, why I'm sitting here saying they need to go out and get Jack Flaherty, because I feel great about Glasnow, who, don't tell anybody, but his playoff numbers have been really, really bad in his career. I know who he is as a pitcher, and I'm just going to bet on the larger sample size, but the postseason stuff hasn't been great for Glasnow. And so they have an ace in Glasnow, and I think, and I truly believe this, I think they can put 3 competent starters behind him. They're probably not going to be, on par with, if they match up against the Phillies, they're going to have a pitching disadvantage in 2 of those for 3 games, probably outside of Glasnow, right? But at the same time, I think if this team's bullpen gets their crap together, it can be a great bullpen. And I think the lineup's going to be great. And I just think that's going to be the recipe. It's not going to be 1 through 4, throwing 3 aces out there. I mean, honestly, if Yamamoto comes back, like, it doesn't change. Yamamoto's an upgrade, I agree, over a Gavin Stone. And yet, like, I don't know, not a massive one, especially if he's only back for the last month of the season. So that's kind of, Greg, to answer you, that's where I land the plane. Like, I think the starting pitching as currently constructed is above average. It's not great. It's above average. They have an ace and they have 3 guys who are solid. I think that's where it's at. And, I think that, and to answer the big question, I think they can win a World Series with that group.
Okay. I mean, that's fair. If you do, I'm a little more skeptical, but we've gone through this very many times, Jeff, that you are the one that's overly positive about everything. I tend to lean on the negative side of some of these things because, like, we've been through this so many times, Matt. You've seen it as much as anybody. So look, if you're telling me that Flaherty makes you feel, Flaherty would make me feel better in a short sense. I was never high on Flaherty from the beginning, so that's why I'm a little bit off on it. But if that's, I can, just like Crochet, I can wrap my head around it and make it like, okay, this is going to be the guy. I'm just going to be skeptical when it gets to the postseason because he has not been something. And now if you're telling me that Glasnow, I didn't even think about it. Don't start making more negative thoughts in my head, Jeff.
Yeah.
I think Flaherty can help. The question for me with Flaherty is, like I said, is just what is it going to cost? Because to me, like, he's not a frontline ace. And Jeff, as much as I do agree with you, like, there is probably a high probability that he would re-sign with the Dodgers just because he is from Burbank, local kid, and all that stuff. Like, that's not a guarantee. And so if that's not a guarantee, he's not necessarily a frontline ace. Like, to me, there needs to be kind of a line. And I'm not somebody, you guys know, like, I don't hang on to prospects just for the sake of hanging on to them. But, like, I don't necessarily agree with a complete overpay by any means either.
Real quick, just as a fun exercise. Last year, obviously, Rangers versus Diamondbacks in the World Series. Here are the 2 pitching rotations that were in that lineup, okay? On the Rangers side, you had Nathan Eovaldi, 3.6 ERA, Jordan Montgomery, 3.2 ERA, Max Scherzer, 3.8 ERA, Andrew Heaney, 4.1 ERA. That was their 1 through 4. Diamondbacks, Gallen, 3.5 ERA, Kelly, 3.3 ERA, Fat, 5.7 ERA, and then a bullpen game in Game 4. So, again, they're not going to win the World Series based on their starting pitching, but my thing is just, let's not pretend like teams haven't done it with way worse than what the Dodgers would be. And the Dodgers, again, would be doing it on the back of scoring 6.5 runs per game is the recipe for winning the World Series. In my estimation.
I can wrap my hand around almost any rotation. Doesn't mean I'll feel confident about it, but at the same time, it comes down to the offense and it comes down to being healthy offensively and being able to hit, because as we've seen always consistently, they just forget how to hit in the postseason for whatever reason it is. Guys going 1 for 22 between Mookie and Freddie last year, something along those lines. Like, that can't happen again. And Shohei needs to show why he's Shohei, and that we've actually seen him in a postseason game. So if we can put up 5 to 6 runs per game on a consistent basis, I would feel great. Absolutely fantastic. But I don't believe Max Muncy is coming back. That just seems very, very long. But he would help lengthen that lineup so much and really help over at third base, even though he's not the greatest third baseman. That would help a ton. But it's offensively that needs to be hit.
We do have another super chat here real quick. Sergio says trades don't matter as long as we have Bobberts. I assume that's a Dave Roberts reference there. So it's not been a good week for Dave Roberts. Sergio, we appreciate the super chat. We appreciate the 2250 people in here on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter. Thanks for joining us. But yes, Dave Roberts to some will always be the issue. So playoff bats and Dave Roberts, some combination of those 2 things, it sounds like might be the death knell. Matt, what were you saying?
Just to real quick on the Rangers thing, and then I know we have Tommy Edman stuff we have to get into, but as our friend Blake, who's on his way to San Diego for the series right now, but is listening to us, he would remind us the Rangers had one Corey Seager that made a little bit of an impact for them.
Yeah, there you go. Well, hey, we got a couple guys. We got a couple guys in that stratosphere on the Dodgers. So hopefully there's some hope there. Hey, real quick, want to pause and give a shout out to one of the sponsors of our show, Sorare MLB. If you have not checked it out yet, please go ahead and do. You can find a link in the description to this one on YouTube, or you can check out Sorare MLB. It is totally free to play. You build a team of collectible cards and then play a fantasy baseball style game against everybody else. You can compete with me, with Blake, with Scott, with our whole team over here at Dodger Blue 1958. It is a ton of fun. My one piece of advice, get Shohei Ohtani, because he is easily the most valuable player in this game, especially once he starts pitching next year. Or you get both offense and pitching stats from one card. So go ahead, check it out. Sorare MLB, again, link in the description. We appreciate their support, and it's been a lot of fun to try that out throughout this season. Matt, you mentioned two other guys that we haven't gotten to. Tommy Edman and Michael Kopech were the two guys acquired this morning. I have talked at length about these two, so I'm glad to cede the floor to you guys. I'll start with you, Matt. This trade, Miguel Vargas, two prospects being sent out. It was later announced that the Dodgers are receiving a 17-year-old international free agent just signed in January in this as well. There's a couple players to be named later, some cash considerations. It's a mess of a trade, but the nuts and bolts are Edman and Kopech coming in, Miguel Vargas, and a pair of prospects going out. Give me your big picture thoughts now that the dust has settled. You've had a few hours to digest.
Well, I'm going to push back on the idea that I've been able to digest just because there was other stuff that then we had to cover on the website, but I get your point. My first reaction is I feel like the Dodgers sort of sold low on Miguel Vargas.
Okay.
Not that I think he had a huge necessarily market, or I'm blanking on the word, value, I guess, if you will, right now. But I think maybe you could have talked teams into like, hey, he's, former top prospect, like with the Jack Flaherty stuff, right? Like has the prospect pedigree. His bat carried him up to the majors.
Yeah.
So I feel like they sold a little short on him, but Edman, versatility. I know we'll get into kind of his role, at least what it seems like the Dodgers are planning on right now. He fills a position of need. I mean, the outfield defense, we've all seen it. It was getting shaky out there with Vargas and Pages, especially when they were playing together. So I don't know. I mean, it's fine. It's not gonna. It's fine. Is probably the best way I could sort of summarize it.
Yeah, Greg, we'll get into Edman's role here in a minute, but just briefly, Edman and Kopech coming in. What were your thoughts?
I mean, I just thought there were moves around the edges. They needed to make some moves. Vargas, it was probably about time for him to go. They weren't even giving him that much playing time. He wasn't getting very many at bats, so it makes sense for him to go. He kind of was just kind of not really blocked, but he came up to he never took the position. Remember, he was given the second base position out of spring training last year, could not hold on to it, got sent down. And then he's just never has proven that he has the ability to stay up here. So him going makes total sense to me. I have no idea when Tommy Edman's even going to get here. It's like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Yeah. I don't know what his timeline is. So that's just another guy that we have to wait and see on. We have so many that we're waiting and seeing on. So I think it's fine. I think it was a move to make a move on the edges to kind of, again, that depth that we've been talking about. He's going to be somebody that can play a bunch of positions, a super utility type guy. But besides that, Kopech, I just want to know I need some of your nerd stats to get my head wrapped around Kopech, because everything I see out of it is all just, he's not a very good pitcher.
He throws really hard, Greg. He throws really hard. Fastball velocity, very big number.
He just may not know where it's going.
Right. I see a lot of things that say bad. I see a bad whip. I see a bad ERA. I see a bad FIP. I see all those things. So give me your nerd stats and make me feel better about that, please.
Well, give me a second on Kopech. Let me chat with Tommy Edman real quick. As I reflected on this, my thoughts were kind of this. I think we're really, really bad at figuring out in trades like this how we quantify when we talk about a guy's defensive capabilities. Because with Tommy Edman, most of the discourse that I see often just comes back to, his batting average or his weighted runs created plus, or pick the offensive thing, which he will always be underwhelming because that is not the strongest part of his game. It's like talking about Miguel Rojas and just saying, like, look how terrible of an offensive player he is, as if that's the only value he provides to the team. Edman, to be clear, for his career, is a much better offensive player than Miguel Rojas was coming into the season, although shout out to Miguel. I was wrong about how good he's been this year. But Edman is not just a guy like Rosario who can play multiple positions. He plays 4 positions, and he's literally above average to elite at every single one of those: second, shortstop, third, and center field. And so you have to keep in mind that defense is a huge part of this. He also, by the way, has averaged 30 stolen bases per year over the last 3 seasons. So he joins Shohei Ohtani as the only guy on the Dodgers who might run and try and steal a few bases. But the biggest thing for me with Edman is, the way I put it is, he kind of answers every single what if that the Dodgers have injury-wise offensively. Now, to Greg's point, assuming he himself comes back healthy. But what if Max Muncy doesn't come back? Tommy Edman, this was pre-Rosario trade, but could be an answer at third base. What if Gavin Lux regresses and goes back to the Gavin Lux of 2 months ago? Well, Tommy Edman could then, in that case, play second base. What if Outman and Pages never figure it out in center field? Well, Edman could be your center fielder. And what if Chris Taylor goes back to being terrible? Then he could kind of play that utility role of playing a different position every day. That was my initial thoughts. Now, David Vassay said this on AM 570, quote, I talked to a few different scouts around the league regarding this trade, and Tommy Edman, the plan for the Dodgers acquiring is for him to play center field. And also if they need him to fill in on certain days at shortstop or second base, he can do that as well. But my understanding is the primary position that Tommy Edman is going to play for the Dodgers is center field, where defense was starting to get a little shaky out there with Andy Pages. A little shaky, by the way, the nicest possible way of describing the Andy Pages era out in center field. He goes on to say Pages probably shifting over to right field, as we talked about earlier. So, Matt, give me your thoughts on Tommy Edman if and when he gets healthy, playing center field for the Dodgers. Do you feel like that's a nice landing spot for him?
I mean, with the Rosario trade, yes. Now, like, that makes sense. And, center field was certainly becoming an issue defensively. And James, I've seen people in the chat saying they should just put James Outman in center field. He does improve you with the glove, but Outman wasn't really providing anything. I mean, he's basically a platoon player, so they can't, he's not somebody that you could, he's not somebody you could really run out there every day. And so, hopefully Edman will help shore that up. Obviously, the wrist surgery, I mean, I that's a little concerning just because he hasn't played yet this year. I know that he sprained his ankle during the rehab process, and so that has kind of delayed his return. But I feel like he's going to be playing uphill, so it's hard. Yeah. For me right now, this basically looks like a trade that they're primarily shoring up their defense with, which to me has value. Fortunately, it's me on the show, not Blake, who says defense doesn't matter and it won't cost you a game, because I completely disagree. In the playoffs, defense can absolutely lose you a game. Yeah. And
absolutely.
I know Blake is listening, so I'm expecting him to text us here in a few minutes. But
go watch Mookie Betts highlights in right field in the 2020 World Series run and tell me that defense doesn't matter.
Yeah. So to me right now, that's what this trade is about. And whatever Edman can provide at the plate, if he is able to hit the ground running, so to speak, then great. But that's not something I'm personally going to be counting on.
Yeah, for his career, by the way, Edman has been a league average hitter against left-handed pitching and 93 career weighted runs created plus against right-handed pitching. So he's basically league average against lefties, slightly below average against righties. But keep in mind, those 93 sounds bad. Go Google what some of the Dodgers weighted runs created plus have been down at the bottom. What Biggio and Kike and Lux against lefties. It's really, really ugly. We would kill for 93 weighted runs created plus if he still happens to be that guy. But I think the injury is the big thing, Greg, and you've stressed this in our conversations. He has made 8 rehab appearances. It's worth noting, has not played defense in any of them. He's been the designated hitter in all of them. He had wrist surgery. As he was coming back from wrist surgery, he had an ankle injury, came back, re-injured the ankle, sat out for a little while, and has now made a handful more appearances since then. Greg, let me ask you this. Is it a fair assumption to believe and assume that the Dodgers have done their due diligence on the injury and to say, hey, I know it doesn't look great, but there's no way the Dodgers trade Miguel Vargas for this guy if they're not positive that he's going to be healthy in the next few weeks, right?
Right. So, I always trust Andrew Friedman and Brandon Gomes. If they're going to do something, I think they have a reason behind it, and it's usually the right move. I think there have been some incorrect move, like Danny Duffy, that I see all the time in the chat there. But there have been bad moves.
They gave up nothing for Danny Duffy. I had to respond to this on social media. They literally gave up a player to be named later, who I said, does anybody know who he is? And Daniel Starkin looked him up, and it's a guy who's getting shelled in independent ball right now. So the Duffy trade is to be clear, they did not give up Miguel Vargas for Danny Duffy. They gave up literally nothing.
All I know is that they traded a guy that never even made it up here. That's all that matters. So he has hit his moment. But either way, I trust in those guys to make the right decision. So if they're trading Vargas for him, which was a high level prospect for Tommy Edman, that means he's going to be back soon. It makes to me, it makes enough sense that he will be. But like you're saying, he's only DH'd, and we already have a DH that is by the name of Shohei Ohtani. That kind of is a pretty good, okay DH. I think he can. People will all agree with that in the chat that Shohei is good. So I think if they're going to make that move, he's going to come up soon, and he's going to play pretty much every day. Depending on he may move around, but he also could very easily be the everyday center fielder for quite some time. And that's unless they trade for like Luis Roberts in some miracle move.
Yeah. Let's talk Kopech real quick. And I can get into my short version on Kopech, and I know our guy Blake Williams has sent in a message to Matt, so I'll give you my short version, and we'll let Blake go second here. Greg, I don't think Kopech is like the answer. He might not even make the playoff roster for all I know. But here's the thing. If you were to draw up the type of relief pitcher that cost you almost nothing, a couple prospects basically outside the organizational top 15 to 20, and say, what would you want to give Mark Prior? It's this. He literally throws 99th percentile fastball velocity. It averages 98.6 miles an hour on the fastball velocity. He gets a ton of swing and miss. He gets a ton of strikeouts. The expected batting average is very good. The location is a mess. So I'm saying if you were to throw all the tools into a guy and his stuff and all that and throw it into a lab and say, Mark Prior, figure it out, this would be the quintessential test case of where the starting point you'd want. I'm not saying it's going to work. I'm just saying that's the reason for optimism if there is one.
Look, I asked you for the nerd stats to make me feel better. That actually does make me slightly feel better until you said that he can't get it over the plate. That's not knowing where it's going to go. That's a little bit of a problem. But look, he's probably it's just depth. I think that's what I thought of that move. The Tommy Edman, Michael Kopech, Amed Rosario, all of these three pieces that they brought in, that looks like depth to me and if you go just by what you were getting and what you had on the roster before, these are upgrades, especially Edman and Rosario. Those are upgrades to what you had before, and that to me is an upgrade overall. That's a move forward. So that's why I know you're saying C+. It's probably C+ because of that, because at least it's a positive move forward. But they do need to do more moves. Something has to happen by 3:00 tomorrow, Matt.
Okay, Matt, give us Blake's thoughts. I see it in my text. He's agreeing with me on Jack Flaherty. So this is a scary thing here. Are we going to agree on Kopech too?
More or less. Blake says he wants the chat or the stream to know that Michael Kopech is basically a younger Joe Kelly, but with somehow less control.
That's amazing. Fantastic.
Somehow less control.
Well, there you go. That's from Blake, who's a Michael Kopech, Jack Flaherty guy.
There you go. Hey, me and Blake agreeing. It's like the two gangs holding up the bandana in between themselves with me and Blake right now on Jack Flaherty and Michael Kopech. We do have a super chat here from Peyton Brown. He said, I'd trade any combination of Stone, Robleski, a bunch of guys kind of outmen on the roster for Scubal, but I wouldn't trade Lux or River Ryan. Would the Tigers go for any package with some combination of those players? I think from a starting point of Stone, Robleski, and outmen, you might be 50% of the way there. Like, I think Stone has a lot of value, former top prospect who's pitching really well. I think Robleski has value. Outman is probably the only other guy on this list who might have some value to a team just because he's at least done it at the major league level, and the Dodgers might be willing to move him. But I think you're probably two sort of premium prospects away from this package making sense. Matt, do you agree with that?
Yeah, the Tigers, they won't have any interest in Biggio, Rosario, Kike, Hayward.
No, Nick Ahmed. Come on, not our Ahmed. He's got the eighth in there.
That's right. Nick Ahmed. Okay, well, same thing. Nick Ahmed, probably not much interest there. Maybe Yarborough, they say, sure, throw him in while we're at it, but he's not going to be like a needle mover. It at least maybe like open some dialogue, perhaps. Yeah. But I think I think they come back and say, okay, like, Stone, Robleski, like rushing Outman needs to be the core of this, and then we can figure out the rest of the pieces later.
Yeah, and I think if you're the Dodgers too, by the way, like, do you really want to move? I mean, obviously, if you're getting Scubal, you'd move just about anybody. But keep in mind, you're also trying to win this year, and whether we like it or not, Gavin Stone's in your top 4 pitchers that are currently healthy, and so I think you could get around moving a guy like Robleski, but I think Stone, because I would rather trade Bobby Miller than Gavin Stone. I know the ceiling might be higher on Bobby Miller, but Stone's at least helpful for you this year. Greg?
That's actually an interesting take. If you put that back up, if you put just that trade for Scubal, the Tigers would say absolutely not.
Yeah,
Stone, Robleski, Biggio, Ahmed, Kike, Hayward, Outman, Yarborough. They'd be like, nah, I'm good, thank you, and just keep on moving.
They've got 1.5 pieces in there they'd like.
Yeah, that's like you're saying. Is there any combination? That combination doesn't work. So, yeah, I don't think that's enough. But either way, like this is. I don't think this, like we said 100 times, the Scubal thing is just not going to happen. But I thought that was interesting. You're saying you'd rather have Stone than Miller. I believe, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but that Miller was the higher rated prospect between the two, no?
Yeah, they were both highly rated, but Bobby Miller was kind of like in the top 30 range and Gavin Stone was kind of in the top 50 range nationally. Obviously, Bobby Miller has the kind of the flashier stuff, whereas Gavin Stone is sort of surviving on a changeup, that kind of a thing. So, he has historically always been one step behind Bobby Miller from a prospect perspective, but he did come with some pedigree himself prior to. Stone struggled last year. Bobby Miller succeeded. This year, it's kind of the exact opposite. So, Matt, if they came to you and said, "Hey, we need to either trade Bobby Miller or Gavin Stone," who would you rather keep if you're the Dodgers?
This is for Scubal?
Yeah, just like if they're in a trade and say, "Hey, the last piece is either Stone or Miller."
I would probably keep Stone. I know Miller, I think he has the bigger upside, but the Dodgers, like they have River Ryan, who I think could sort of reach that potential. You're getting Scubal, who's a pretty, elite pitcher. Yamamoto, if he ever is back, even if it's next year that he's back healthy, kind of at his full potential. Like you have the high ceiling guys where I think somebody like Gavin Stone, who has proven like he's a little bit more consistent. That would have some value. Yeah.
It's an interesting one because to your point, it's like, Gavin, and I've kind of always pushed back against the Bobby Miller's the ceiling guy and Stone is the floor guy. I think there's some truth to it, but I think sometimes we just equate fastball velocity to ceiling and say, well, Gavin Stone only throws like 96, therefore he must not have a high ceiling, which clearly isn't the case. I think Stone has, number 2 starter ceiling in there somewhere, whereas the floor is probably like a number 3.5 type guy. Whereas obviously we're seeing with Bobby Miller, the range of outcomes could be number 1 type guy with the stuff that he has, or if he never figures it out and can't strike anybody out, he's probably a back end of the rotation guy at best, if not potentially a reliever. So there's obviously room, just like Gavin Stone struggled last year. We didn't give up on him. There's plenty of time for Bobby Miller to figure this one out. We're over the hour mark. Let's see if we can do maybe 1 or 2 questions and then we'll call it good here. Again, we appreciate Greg Bergman joining us here from ESPN LA, host of Blue Review. Give us Monday through Friday, 9:30 a.m. ESPN LA YouTube page. Did I get that right?
You got that exactly right. Every morning, Monday through Friday, 9:30 to 9:55 on the ESPN LA YouTube page. It is live. It is with me, Marcus Grant, and Parker Bell. And I know that Matt comes on very often. Jeff is on. He's actually going to be on a couple times this week. I think Thursday and Friday with us.
Super desperate for guests this week. Everybody else canceled the day after the trade deadline. And so you're stuck with me Thursday and Friday.
No, I like to go with people that I have good rapport with. And that's why I want you two on there as much as possible because it's fun when you guys are on. So yeah, every morning, 9:30, 9:55, and we just do exactly what we're doing here. And it's all just our honest opinions and honest takes, and that it's just well-informed. We're not going to be, people that are just taking the side of the Dodgers all the time because we are not the Dodger station. So it's going to be real thoughts and Dodger takes.
You are the official station of USC football, though.
Why you got to throw that in my face?
I just wanted to make sure. I wanted to give you guys proper credit as being the official home of USC Trojans football.
You didn't say we were the official home of the Kings. You didn't say
everybody knows that
home of the Lakers. No, that just happened. We're the official home of the Lakers, of LAFC, of the Angels, of the other big play, the Rams. You went straight to USC.
That was just the one that popped to the front of my mind.
People might forget about the 8th best team in the Big Ten, Greg. So Matt needed to make sure that they remembered it.
That's right.
Let's get to some questions. Noisy Ninja here. With Vargas being traded, could there be a Teoscar extension coming? I mean, Vargas, the Dodgers farm system not overflowing with outfield guys. Vargas seemed to be a guy they were at least trying out there. Matt, do you see any connection between a Vargas trade and maybe an increased desire to lock Teoscar up?
Not too much. I thought if I've expressed this on some of our shows that I was hosting last week with the different guys as we were rotating in, that I feel like a Teoscar extension is probably coming at some point after the deadline. When they did it with Muncy, I think it was late August, maybe even early September. And so I think it'll just be a similar timeline to that, where, get through the deadline, see what the pieces are, and then, whatever potential salary you might have added, and then start negotiating with Teoscar.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. Like, Vargas's biggest issue is he's a designated hitter, or a team that's willing to live with his defense at second or third.
Well, clearly the Dodgers weren't at third base, and they've had a hole there for several months.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, it's Michael Busch. You could go back to Willie Calhoun. I mean, there are teams that there's value in a guy like Miguel Vargas. The Dodgers just aren't one of them because of the value they place on defense, as well as the fact that they have a designated hitter by the name of Shohei Ohtani, who isn't going anywhere for a million years. TQT, with Houston giving up their second and third best prospects for a back-end starter, what's the sky-high cost for Flaherty, and are you willing to pay it? It's worth pointing out real quick that not all second and third prospects are created equally. And depending on what site you're going on, I saw some prospect guys getting very irritated that everyone was quoting MLB Pipeline rankings, when the fact is apparently that MLB Pipeline does not update those rankings midway through the season. So they update their top 100. They do not update each team's top 30. So worth pointing out. But the point is, the cost for Flaherty is not going to be inexpensive. We've kind of batted this around, but I guess it simplifies it. Would you pay the cost that it takes to get Jack Flaherty? Greg, it sounds like your answer is no.
No, it's yes. It's no. I think giving up some big time prospects is not the right move for this team to go after Jack Flaherty. Look, but again, as I said before, I trust in Andrew Friedman. If he thinks that moving those two, let's say it's the second and third best prospects, who I don't have it in front of me right now, and especially because the Pipeline doesn't.
It wouldn't be the Dodgers second and third. Dodgers somewhere in the top three are Rushing, DePaula, and River Ryan are the top three in some order.
Yeah, I see Nick Frasso in there as well. So, yes, if you're giving me two of those, I wouldn't do it for him, because I truly don't believe that he would be at that effective in the postseason. Now, if they do that, and that's the move that they make, I trust that Andrew Friedman is doing it because he believes he can be effective in the postseason. He can be a difference maker in the postseason. So if that's what happens, I will trust Andrew Friedman. But otherwise, if it's up to me, I wouldn't be making that move. No.
Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine if they headline it with like somewhere in the 6 to 10.
What about if Robleski's the headliner?
That's a little.
That's the hard part. I mean, most people probably have Robleski still as like the 7th or 8th best prospect in the system.
If it's like Robleski and then not very much at like one lower level guy, then sure, I'll probably do that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would probably pay it. It's hard to attach names to this because, again, these prospect ranking lists are so different from team to team. Having seen Robleski 100 from the left-hand side, all those pitches, that would terrify me. I would love to say, like, is there a Landon Knack involved in a package, and, Yoendry Vargas or something, who's like this 19-year-old shortstop that a lot of people are excited about, but he's a ways away. Like, those are the types of guys that I would like to move. One of the catchers, Lorenzo or Cartaya, maybe fits. I don't think you can move Rushing or DePaula in a trade for a guy who's going to be gone after a year. So I think if it's like somewhere, two prospects in the back half of the top 10, early, teens, that kind of a thing. But
Nomo FOMO says, sorry not to cut you off, but what are they going to do with Fiducia? So throw him into that trade as well.
Yeah, and Ryan Yarborough. They can have Yarborough.
Yeah.
Hey, shout out Fiducia. Like, can we get this guy into a game before he gets set back down? I mean, just a pinch hit opportunity.
There's no more time. It's not going to happen. They play tomorrow. He's going to be going down before any of that happens, actually. And by the way, in the other trade that they made, the one for Kopech and Edman, they moved a guy shortstop that was a single A prospect, shortstop Alexander Albertus. He's supposed to be a very, very good shortstop prospect. So they did move him. And I know he was further down the list, but that was somebody that we had. I know you guys know Bruce Kuntz. He came on and said he was a very high end prospect that they really, really liked for the Dodgers. And they moved him, and that was very quiet. So that was kind of shocking.
And he's hurt. It turns out that he's hurt too. He has like a fractured something or another.
No, so he got hurt there. Okay.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I messaged with him a little bit. He actually, Perez, I think he had the other guy Perez as like 15 to 20 range organizationally, and Albertus was just outside the top 20. And then Justin Lorber, who's come on our show as well, kind of had it inverted. So both those guys were in the like 18 to 25 range, it seems like. So, okay, last question here, and this one's mostly a Matthew question. So why is Robert Downey Jr. a bad choice for Dr. Doom? Matt, I know this is going to ruin your night, so I apologize we're ending here, but this is just perfect. Matt's a big Marvel guy, and this is devastating. He's got the Iron Man fist back there. Is that that's the Iron Man thing behind you?
It's his gauntlet. I have the helmet too. I need to get a new lamp because that one's too narrow for the helmet, so the helmet's down below. You guys can't see it. Maybe I'll wear it for one of the if the Dodgers trade for Scubal tomorrow, I'll come on our live show with the Iron Man helmet on. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why they did that. Like, Marvel needed a serious boost. They've been struggling since they got rid of the regular Avengers. Basically, it's been real hit or miss with a lot of their shows and movies. They've hit on some shows. The movies, for the most part, have been pretty downhill. So if you're going to bring Robert Downey Jr. back into the Marvel universe, just reboot Iron Man somehow. Like, I text you guys, like, just say he used, the time stone or any stone you want to bring himself back, and he's Iron Man, and let's just go down that road.
Greg, are you a Marvel guy?
I'm a very big Marvel guy, but I'm now on the outside of Marvel. I only care about Deadpool, and that's the only thing I care that's in the Marvel universe anymore.
Daniel's seeing the movie right now.
I saw it on Friday. It was fantastic. I loved it so much. It did everything that I wanted it to do. But this whole Robert Downey Jr. thing, this is a terrible, terrible choice. I know it's just getting too much into the multiverse, and I'm just kind of tired of the whole multiverse thing. So, yeah, I'm out on it. I saw somebody put it, was it Sports Center that put it out, like, explain this in basketball terms, and somebody said the way that they put it was Kobe comes back from the dead and plays for the Celtics.
Jeez.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is, though. It's coming back from the dead to be a bad guy, and one of the worst bad guys that Marvel Universe has in Dr. Doom. Can I
ask a dumb question? But he's not coming back as the same person that he was in Iron Man, right? It's just the same actor.
Same actor.
They haven't explained that part yet.
It's multiverse, so you can be anything in any multiverse. If you watched Endgame, there was the John Krasinski as Mr. Fantastic. Like, that was something that was just in another universe, and that's basically the same thing that they're doing here. In another universe, Robert Downey Jr. is or Stark is Dr. Doom, and that's just awful.
Yeah. And you call my stuff nerd stats. I just want to be clear. We're calling what I do nerd stats, and you're talking about multiverses and
it's nerdy. It's nerdy.
Okay,
but Matt gets it.
I don't like the multiverse either. So, like, I'm out on all the nerd stuff.
Yeah, totally out. I'm totally out unless it's Deadpool because he's funny.
Okay, there you go. Well, hey everybody, we appreciate you joining us as always. Tons of content coming tomorrow. We've got a 2 p.m. We are going to be going live for an hour and 15, hour and 30, leading up to the deadline. The deadline's at 3 p.m. So me, Scott, and Daniel will be on here live, maybe a rotating cast of people hopping on with us to chat about moves the Dodgers make or don't make, or other moves that are made, or whatever happens. It should be fun. I think we were on for like 2.5 hours last year because like Ryan Yarborough news broke like 30 minutes after the deadline. It was chaos. So hopefully not 2.5 hours, but we'll see. So make sure you subscribe, ring the notification bell here. There's also a Dodgers game tomorrow night, which is good news. So we've got a post-game show. Anthony and I will be doing the post-game show live after that. So tons of content coming. We've got an interview with the St. Louis Cardinals beat writer coming in the next few days, breaking down Tommy Edman and the latest news on that. So tons of stuff. So make sure you subscribe, ring the notification bell. That is Matthew Moreno. That is Greg Bergman. Again, check out ESPN LA's YouTube page, The Blue Review, 9:30 to 9:55 every morning, Monday through Friday. You can see Greg and his crew. And again, I'll be on Thursday and Friday, giving my bad takes on his show instead of on this show. So positive takes, optimism. Hey, Gavin Lux came back around. Sometimes these things work out, Greg, and all the stock that I held on to, I get to take a small victory lap. So
it did. The last thing I'm going to say is get me Tanner Scott. That's it.
Wow. We didn't even get a chance to talk about that. I'm out on Tanner Scott. No chance.
Oh, wow. Okay. We can go. We can talk about it later.
Save that for the Blue Review on why they should have or shouldn't, or why
there you go. There you go. Well, hey, everybody, enjoy the rest of your night. As always, go Dodgers.